Is this real? Or is this just a ride? The world is like a ride. You think it's real? It's just a ride. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. The world is like a ride. You think it's real? It's just a ride. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. Ride goes up and down, round and round. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored. It's up and down, round and round, and it's very loud. Don't worry, don't be afraid, it's just a ride. And we can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. Why are we here?
I think we're part of a greater wisdom than we will ever understand. A higher order. Call it what you want. Know what I call it? The big electron. Whoa, whoa. Whoa, whoa. The big electron. Whoa, whoa. Whoa, whoa. It doesn't punish, doesn't reward. It doesn't judge at all. It just is, and so are we. For a little while.
Well, welcome, folks. You're not in the Corporation Nation. You would have been in the Corporation Nation a while ago. Today, you're in Red Pill Sunday School. It is Sunday, January 21st, 2018. We're going live today with our good friend, compatriot, and all-around crazy dude with all kinds of crazy conspiracy theories that I happen to agree with, Patrick Jordan. Welcome, Patrick.
How do, Clint? I love live media because when you make a mistake, it's there forever.
Damn, I can't cut it out.
You didn't make a mistake. We are still in the Corporation Nation.
It is true. I must say that wasn't really a mistake. It was always a true statement. Vaccinefraud.com is Patrick's website. That's vaccinefraud.com. The name spells it out pretty good for you, although what it doesn't say is that vaccines are a biological weapon, but we won't get into that right now. Maybe someday. But Patrick, the reason that we've gathered here today in Red Pill Sunday School, we have here on UCY.TV, by the way, we're going to have a little discussion, a little critique, a little praise, and a whole lot of discussion about a television show that was on that probably most people did not see. Now, during Christmas time, I decided I was going to send Patrick a little care package of some movies, and so I sent him some of my favorites. They Live was, of course, at the top of the list, because everybody should have that as a primer to to how society works. Shortly under They Live comes a little obscure television program that had a huge budget. It was a Ridley Scott production and had some pretty big actors. A lot of money was spent on it. They filmed it actually in the halls of Congress and all over, the congressional. What do they call it? The park or whatever it's called. So I mean, it was big money. They had a lot of permissions and a lot of things going on here. So this little thing was called Brain Dead, and so I sent the series to Patrick along with some other movies. Brain Dead. Folks, if you haven't seen Brain Dead came out in 2016. And this was, of course, after the Corporation Nation, after all the stuff that we talked about with Patrick about bugs, specifically archons, specifically as the Gnostics called them, what was it?
Demented alien mind parasites.
Demented alien mind parasites from outer space. So, how do we begin this? Because I gotta say, this is my favorite television series ever made. Forget everything else that I've ever seen. This was some of the most brilliant writing I've ever seen, both politically, showing the inner workings of government, but also about this seemingly funny notion that a meteor came from outer space, a bunch of bugs crawled out of it, and infected all the brains of government and of all the crazy people you see on the left or the right, who can never possibly see the angle of the left and they can never see the angle of the right. And they seem to increase political arguments, basically. And it was just so brilliantly done that I really don't even know where to begin. I got a bunch of notes. I rewatched the first 4 episodes just because I knew that's where a lot of the juice was. And just as a warning, folks, if you don't want a spoiler alert, if you don't want to be spoiled for this show, you better not listen. You better watch it and save this show for later, because we're going to be getting in depth into this show today. So, Patrick, the first thing that this show says, and what's amazing to me, is that it basically shows Trump and everybody else, going for the presidency. It's pretty much telling you that Trump's going to win. This is 2016 that this was on. It says, and the first thing it says, with Trump in the background, in the year 2016, there was a growing sense that people were losing their minds, unquote. That's the first thing that this series says in print, right? So, and in the background is a bunch of video screens with all the news and the left and the right, the Democrats versus the Republicans, and then ends with Donald Trump saying something. They're literally telling you what's going to happen in the future. It's pretty amazing.
Okay, so if I can give a little preamble, what I want everybody to understand, this is the most important thing to understand about all media. Spielberg, a long time ago, highlighted that if you feel familiar with or comfortable with a story, and it's like something that was passed down from the time of cavemen, it's like sitting around a fire and stuff, you're more likely to accept it, and you're more likely to promote it and pass it on generationally. And that was like a key thought that was embedded in my mind. And as my development progressed, I was looking at a bunch of different things, including what's called the Epic of Gilgamesh, or Gilgamesh, if you're an RBN host. And it's like, my God, this 5,000-year-old text was the template for all action-adventure that was ever written. Because, I got pattern recognition. People think, oh, Pat Jordan, he's smart. It's like, no, I just see patterns. And I saw Gilgamesh as like the pattern for every damn thing that ever came out of Hollywood. And that's when I started to write a book. I never finished it, and, how can you in light of the things that we do, Clint? And the name of the book was called At the Movie, meaning there's only one theme. And all they do is they put a Babylonian name change on it, or they put different lipstick on the pig, and they resell it. So when I saw this, Clint, and, this is going to be like Siskel and Ebert, you're seeing the political end of it. I'm seeing this dark, deep history thing of it, because they did show all the unrest in the world, and they showed Trump, and they showed the political stuff, and they said people went crazy, but then they zoomed into just one broadcast, and it was the meteorite. And if you read the Epic of Gilgamesh, the first thing that happens of import in that book is, and they call it a mountain, a flaming mountain fell to earth, and they didn't know what it was. And Gilgamesh came up to it, and it's like, gee, what's that? And his mother says, I don't know, why don't you try mating with it? And when I was making notes for this show, Clint, I'm thinking, so, metaphorically, what would that mean? To mate with a meteorite? Well, that would be to merge with it, to become one, singularity. And I'm thinking, oh my God. So even Kurzweil and Musk and Gates and whoever else is out there, pushing singularity, none of this stuff is new or novel. It's the same damn story.
Well said. Well said. I dated a meteor one time.
I'm famed.
we just weren't compatible. You know, it came to it was a rocky finish. But
you got to telegraph your jokes. I'm not going to make it through this.
So let's see. The amazing thing about this was the mockery as well. The mockery of everything political, and what you just mentioned with all the screens, and they focus in. This is the beginning of the beginning of the end, basically. It says in the year 2016 there was a growing sense that people were losing their minds, and it focuses in on this shot. All that stuff was already happening. So that was the news right then when all that stuff was happening. So the notion, God, I seriously don't know where to begin. I've got this. I mean, I kept taking just these notes as I'm going through this thing, thinking everything they do in this is so frickin' important.
Just jump in, man. I'll follow you. I got my nose plugged.
I'm gonna start with the political. Remember, this is about the minority whip and the majority whip in the Congress, the Democrat and the Republican, and they're going at each other constantly throughout the show, and it's brilliant. Again, big time actors. What's his name? Wheatus.
Tony Shalhoub.
Tony Shalhoub, who is just brilliant in this show. The bugs come, and what happens is basically they look like ants, and of course, because again, here's the problem, Pat. Here's the main problem with the things that we talk about. We're talking about the microscopic world most of the time. We're talking about things that are so frightening that most people can't imagine. Because we can't show you an image. We can't show you what an archon looks like. We can't show you what a brain parasite looks like. We can't show you. We can show you can watch all these movies, the Alien series, you can watch the Terminator, you can watch, but you can't watch a movie about these microscopic organisms. However, they did a really good job, and they made them look like ants. And the ants crawl inside of the ear while you're sleeping, or while someone's forcing you to accept it, and they literally eat out part of the brain. Like they get rid of part of the brain, and it has to do with memories and everything else. And the brain comes out of the ear. And it's just so freaking well done that I can't believe it. So now you've got the Democratic senator and his sister, and you've got the Republican senator who is infected with the brain bugs. And the second that he gets infected, and the second that anyone gets infected with the bugs, this is what I thought was one of the most interesting aspects. Immediately, this guy's a drunk, all right? The Republican senator is a drunk. He quits alcohol. Right. He starts drinking green, basically a mixture of kale and, whatever, green junk, right? And what I thought was what I thought was really funny is what they called that. Did you catch that? They kept saying, "Have you tried this?" Oh, they called it Forever Juice, the book that they were recommending to people.
Well, yeah.
Forever Juice. What does that sound like? Forever Juice.
Oh, ow!
Forever Juice.
I missed
Forever Juice. Forever Juice. Forever Juice. They kept saying it over and over. Forever Juice. Forever Juice. Yeah, I didn't miss that at all. That was the first thing. But the fact that it made you change your behavior, and this is what we've talked about so many times before. So if you haven't heard our previous conversations, we're kind of presuming you have. If not, then there's so many shows that we've done about this. It's just the assumption that people know what we're talking about. Otherwise, you'll think we're crazy. But so it changes your behavior, just as we've talked about, the model of your behavior. You start eating healthy. You start taking care of the body. And what do they say? He says the body is a temple.
Oh, my God.
Who's speaking? The bug is speaking. The body is literally the temple of the bug. So the bug changes the behavior to make the temple better for the bug. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be good or bad for the body. it means it's going to be good or bad for the bug, because the bug is now the body's temple, which it's inhabiting. Forever juice.
Hey, Clint, I missed all this stuff. So it's like Wayne's World, where they bow and they go, "I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy."
Well, no, yeah,
I missed all that.
I pressed pause so many times because I kept hearing these and seeing these things. I'm like, oh my God, they're revealing it all. They're revealing it all, but no one's going to see it. No one's going to hear it. Oh my gosh, I couldn't believe it.
It's like watching it all over again, man.
Yeah, and what struck me as really, really incredible was also the dialogue between, it's always a Republican versus a Democrat. It's the theme throughout, which really in the end means absolutely nothing. But it's an identity. And one time when they were talking, right? So you got the sister of the Democrat who is a documentary filmmaker, and she gets hired by her brother to do some work for her. And then you've got the Republican assistant who becomes the chief of staff, and they're dating. And before they start really dating, they're going through this political banner, and here's what they say. Here's what she says, and I thought this was probably the most brilliant quote, and it applies to all of us. It applies to everyone. She says, after this long diatribe, she says, "We don't really talk, do we? We just contradict each other."
Oh, wow.
We don't really talk, do we? We just contradict each other. I was like, holy crap. That is so true. I mean, in the political world, that is the greatest truth I've ever heard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, like I said, there's so much we can talk about.
Okay, so if I can, let me pick up points as you make them. First off, you said that the executive producer was Zucker, but Ridley Scott was the producer, and wasn't Ridley Scott the guy that produced the Alien series?
Absolutely.
Or at least first movie?
That and the Blade Runner and all the classics.
Okay. So, we're talking, these people are insiders at the highest level that are tapped into, like, the story. So it's not like, aren't, the Kings, aren't they a creative couple? Didn't they make a funny satire? Well, and see, you sent me the entire disc set, and the last disc is, like, extras where they do interviews with the writers and the producer. And Michelle King said, sometimes it feels like we were making a documentary.
Yes, that's exactly what both the creator of They Live said, and Roddy Piper. Right. They both said this is a document. They didn't say it felt like it. They said this is a documentary. They Live is a documentary. That's straight from the creator, the writer. What's his name? I can't remember. He did. Yeah, Carpenter. He did The Thing, and he did all those wacky movies. But, a documentary. I mean, this was like watching a documentary, but one that was so fantastically portrayed, because, again, you're talking about something that you can't see, right?
Right. Okay, so, and this thing that you can't see, according to their breakdown, because, these were the extras, and I watched them before the show, and I took notes. Robert King said it was inspired by the government shutdown. I think, was it that 2014? Because he said like 2 years ago, and so this show came out in 2016.
And coincidentally, the government's shut down right now. Right today.
Interesting, very interesting. He said the number one thing that they wanted to bring across, and this addresses what you had brought up earlier, is that the bugs eat the half of the brain that keeps you from being an extremist. So it's like the bugs was selectively targeted the architecture of the brain that would make you, and when I was watching the Democrats and Republicans go at it, I've always thought this. Isn't it funny during the Bush administration that I can't remember the difference between a Shia and a Sunni. One is conservative and one is, let's just say, liberal. And the Bush administration could not negotiate with the conservative branch. And coming from Bush, he's a conservative, but conservatives and conservatives could not work together, so he worked with the other side. And it's like that just, for my mind, it made perfect sense, because you can't put a North Pole and a North Pole magnet together. They completely rub against each other. And so everybody had gone extremist. But when I look at something like that, you're doing the political end, I'm doing the bug end of it. The X-Files had, and it was just one mention by the woman that was called the Apostle in that series. She said the alien races are at war with each other. And it's like, oh my God, because all my life, Clint, I've been trying to harmonize myth and science fiction and all the crap that we're talking about with the real world, with the biological world. And that's when it hit me. Chris Carter's words were that, hey, herpes don't get along with measles. If we're going to make an analogy. So the alien races are at war. And what you saw, the split down the Democrat and Republican lines were that Tony Shalhoub had the Queen in his head, and his compatriot that was the female senator on the Republican side, she had the male in her brain, and they did not get along.
Which, by the way, I think was probably one of the best scenes in the history of television.
Oh no! Which one?
When those two got together. And they revealed that the bug, the male bug or the female bug, was in him, and the male bug was in her. She was a Democratic on the other side, and the love scene,
right?
That if you could call it that they had this hideous old woman and this old senator, it was freaking brilliant and hilarious at the same time. I mean, it was shockingly well done. The way they did that, they get together in their office, the bug comes out of their ears, and they, make bug love. I don't know. It was just hilarious. I was just like, brilliant, just unbelievably brilliant. And this is one thing I will say. So now we've revealed that there's a king and a queen,
right?
And like all science fiction movies of the genre where you have an infestation or an attack, whether it's robots, whether it's a hive of some kind, there's always a queen.
Right.
There's always a queen.
Right.
There's always something sending out a signal. And this thing was all about, and this, I find this extremely fascinating too, because this is right on par with our research. We're comparing our real research with this show and saying that everything's pretty much besides the fantastic, besides the ridiculous, it's pretty much accurate to what we've uncovered in the reality in nature, right? Proven, no question about it. And in this case, we find again that there is a central key communication device. In this case, it's the queen sending out messages to the entirety of the hive, which is driving most of the senators at this point. And of course, again, spoiler, if we're going to spoil it for you, that is how they defeat it, right?
Right.
Eventually they kill the queen, and all the other bugs, all the other ant-like bugs, can't do anything without their queen, right? So the communication device. Now, I want to compare that, Patrick, to what we've learned with prions and with all these other things, your interferon and all these different things. They're all communication driven. They're all, all your cells. Your cells are communication devices. That's all. There is a signal. There is a frequency. There is a purpose. There is a chemical telephone call that's being made, and all these cells are interacting through communication. That's what they do. They're not just random things that happen. I mean, they're literally communicating, right? And that's why when the virus, that's why cancer happens, because it's miscommunication. That's why you got the misfolded prions, which are programming healthy prions and causing them to evolve into something they're not. It's all about communication. And so what kills the bug? What kills the parasite? Of course, it's either a frequency or a lack thereof, a communication.
So, Clint, I actually got like a creepy feeling watching this series because I'd never seen it before until you sent it to me, and thanks for that. And then I got kind of like offended because in 2008, I started to address these topics, and in my books, because even my Rise and Fall series, although it came out in 2010, I was writing it over that 2-year period from 2008 to 2010. And the Rise and Fall series features the zombie parasites. So, and none of this is unique to me. All I'm doing, I'm the pattern recognizer. I was saying, okay, this is what I see in nature. You could pick it up in National Geographic, and National Geographic probably featured it for years, well before I discovered it. But what I did is I harmonized it with every other aspect of life around us. Politics, religion, medicine, all that stuff, and said, you know what, these aren't myths. This is all real, and it's all biology. And what I had brought into the discussion, because, I was on RBN with Rebecca Carley in 2008 till 2011, I had always said that, because, I was onto the trail of the witch queens, and I said, I had a bumblebee nest in my back porch. And every time I went out the back door, the wall, and I'm not kidding you, man, the wall would literally vibrate. And it scared the holy hell out of me because a bumblebee can sting continuously, never lose its stinger, and never die. So it was a threat to me and my mom. So what I did is I called the entomology extension service at the University of Illinois, and I said, what should I do? And he said, well, if you're not going to do anything drastic, because I told him I wouldn't use toxic chemicals, he says the only option you have is to wait until wintertime. All of the drones, and they're all females, they'll all die off. And then you go in there, you take the wall off, you look for the nest, you kill the queen, and that hive will never come back. And I'll be damned if that's exactly how it went, Clint.
Well, you took away its purpose. You took away its organization. You took away its. Yeah. Oh, if you have nothing to serve, no queen to serve anymore, well, then you're just gonna disperse. You're not gonna have any singular purpose anymore. And again, how many science fiction movies has that as the story? I mean, it's countless, right? It's always. And that's always
why I wrote the book, the movie, because people, you get titillated by watching a new movie, and there's new actors, and there's a new supposed plot, and there's new action, but it's all the same damn story.
Yeah, folks, just as a reference, just again, so you don't think we're nuts, front cover of National Geographic, which I went right out and bought when I heard about it, because of course one of our listeners was like, "Dude, did you see this?" It's called, literally, it's got a picture of a ladybug guarding a wasp thing, which eventually eats its guts out, right? That's because that's the brain parasites controlling it. And remember, one of the things that people quoted me on that they thought was one of my better quotes was that ladybugs are real badasses in nature.
Okay,
they're fierce, right? So people have sent me that quote before just to get me going. Just joke. Ladybugs are real badasses in nature, but once they get that parasite in them, they're complete zombies to the need of the wasp. Now, we covered all this. This has become popular mainstream stuff at this point.
Right.
Right? Some lady
before this series came out, Clint. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, we covered this in such incredible detail. There's a book written about it. There's all kinds of things that came out. And then this series just kind of came and went. And again, National Geographic, Real Zombies, The Strange Science of the Living Dead. That's all you got to look for, right? Real Zombies. Real Zombies, The Strange Science of the Living Dead. And it goes through all kinds of different examples of brain parasites, okay? That is what we're talking about in reality. Now, in the fiction, you create something like Brain Dead, a television series which is very clever, which kind of dances around but never reveals that this is actually a true story.
Right. Okay, so let's hear what Zucker had to say, the executive producer, in this interview. He said, as this went along, we kind of saw that reality and fiction were inextractable.
Oh, shit.
Say no, man. Come on. These people are at the top of the game.
There was also God, there was so much. One of the things. Okay, so here's two lines that I was amazed by, that I'm still kind of like going crazy over. One of the things, the husband was infected, the wife wasn't. He grabs her from behind and he holds her while she sees these ants coming towards her to go infect her, and she's just, of course she couldn't do anything. But one of the things he says to her, Patrick, is, "You're still going to be yourself. We're gonna be in love. Everything's gonna be okay. You're still gonna be yourself." And there again, it's a true statement. It's not that you're losing your personality. You don't lose your memories, or at least not most of them, because if you cut out some part of your brain, of course you're going to be losing something. But the notion here that you're going to still be yourself, right? The ladybug still looks and acts like a ladybug, but the ant can walk around and still act like an ant, but its purpose has changed. Right? And it's willing to harm itself and basically go to any extreme to protect its host, to protect its parasite, to protect that which is infecting it. And that is kind of what you see happening in this too. Although in this case, they really went out of their way to make it politically based, because I think that's probably the only way they could make it happen, was to gear it towards politics, to make it really sell and really go out there. But there's this backstory that's happening with these bugs that's just, it's incredible. The other thing is when she challenges one of the ladies that has a bug, she says the most bizarre thing. She doesn't threaten her. The bug lady, she says, "You're outnumbered." And she's like, well, what do you mean? And, you wouldn't expect that from somebody like, "You fucking whore," or something like that. But she says no. She looks like she's going to insult her. She says, "You're outnumbered." And the girl who's not infected, she's like, "Well, what does that mean? By who? Who am I outnumbered by?" And she says, "By the people you're outnumbered by." That was her response.
That was chilling. Because I've been saying that for years. Everybody comes to me, Clint, with these like crises of conscience, and they go, "Well, how can these creatures like pollute the land and the water and do chemtrails and try to poison us like vermin, and not realize that they live on this same planet with us?" And I go, "They ain't us.
They're ladybugs they're literally, in other words, what you're asking." And I stopped asking this question once I fully understand the notion of brain parasites and how, even the CDC admits and is warning that toxoplasmosis, it probably infects 40% of the entire population, which causes you to do stupid things, right? That's right. On the CDC website. A brain parasite is affecting 40% of the entire population of the frickin' Earth.
Yeah.
Causing you to do stupid things, or here's the interesting about toxoplasmosis. It causes girls to up pretty, make themselves presentable, and it does the opposite in guys. It causes guys to be lazy and dress down. Is one of the studies. It causes guys to get a sexual attraction by doing really stupid ass things like high-speed motorcycle rides, right? Going outrageously fast when you're pretty certain you're going to crash, but you got to have the rush because the bug is driving you to do that. It's giving you a sexual pleasure a dopamine response, right, to do stupid stuff. And so they take these autopsies of people and they find toxoplasmosis in all high-speed motorcycle accidents because people aren't acting. They're not. You think you're being cool. You think you're being a real hotshot. Next thing you know, you end up dead on an autopsy table, and they find out that the parasite was driving you to be a complete asshole and go 150 down the freeway.
And this is the most difficult thing for the man and woman off the street to accept. This is the resistance that I've got for the past 8 years, where I say your thoughts and emotions may not be your own. And it goes to the Sun Tzu maxims. Know yourself. That was the first one. Know yourself. Know your enemy and expect the unexpected. And it's so difficult for people to do that because they don't even know themselves. They haven't examined themselves to say, hey, am I really cool crashing my bike on an interstate, or was that something outside of me? Or inside of me, actually.
I have children. I have all these responsibilities. I have this. I have that. And yet I'm going to go do something that's almost certainly going to harm me. Well, and that's the thing, right? It's all about taking away the fear of self-harm, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let the parasite eat your guts out. It's perfectly normal to allow parasites to literally wasps to grow into your body and eat your guts out for sustenance until they're ready to burst out and eat the rest of you for a snack. It's perfectly normal behavior to do that for a bug, for a ladybug, or for a worm, or whatever it's infecting is perfectly normal, right? So, I mean, what you're saying, and what I find so fascinating is we were talking about extremophiles here. Even in this show, they were reconstructible. They weren't indestructible.
Oh yeah, that was weird ass. Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't tell if they were eating the dead, the bugs, or if they were putting them back together. I couldn't tell. But what we're talking about is literally, when you're talking about your chemtrails, when you're talking about this whole concept of geoengineering, which, by the way, is being taught in the highest colleges. There's courses in it. This is how I knew instantly that this was a real thing, and that I could have no more doubts when I found out that Harvard and MIT and all these different colleges are teaching geoengineering, teaching kids that they're going to save the world somehow by altering the land, the sea, and the atmosphere, the air. Right? I mean, are you kidding? You're going to reseed the oceans. You're gonna mess with the fault lines, and you're going to completely alter the atmosphere. That sounds like you're saving the planet. That's what they're teaching kids. It's like this. It's this horrifying thing, and all these programs all throughout these top-notch colleges all over the world for geoengineering. I'm like, oh my god, because I mean they're calling these people experts in geoengineering, so I'm like, well, you have to be getting some kind of degree, right? So I collected all the information and I put it on my blog, degrees in geoengineering, right? And if that doesn't convince someone, I don't know what will. So it's like this, almost like this secretive course that you can take, but it's not so secret, right? And it's being sold to these kids, these idiot kids, who think they're literally going to save the world by altering it, right? So what are we talking about when you say you're going to reseed the seas? You're gonna redo the skies, redo the atmosphere, and you're gonna alter the land, the fault lines, and everything else. That's called, what's that called, Patrick?
Insanity?
No, what's the word? I lost the word. What's the word? It's terraforming.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I mean, How can you call it anything else? It's terraforming.
And it's hostile to our life. The aluminum in the soil has caused Monsanto to create hybrid corn that can grow in high aluminum, because aluminum will build up in the tissue of most plants and kill it.
So maybe corn and soybeans are the cherry blossom. Yeah.
Yeah. And Clint, see, this This is the part where I started to take a bit of offense to this TV series, because they started calling them bugheads. And it's like, man, well before this series came out, in order to try to convey concepts to the general public, I was calling the population at large bugheads, because we're dealing with analogy and meme when the ants, because you had to show it in a physical form. Showing it on a microscope would not be dramatic for TV. So in physical form, they showed the ants that came out of the meteorite. They got into people's heads. Well, that's a bug in the brain. So that can go two ways. A bug in computer talk is like a virus, a bug in the central processing unit, or a mind virus, a meme, or if we just go to my world then, where I live in biology. If it is literally a virus, what do you got? I got a cold, I caught a bug. Then that virus then is what they were making the ant analogy with. There's something that got into the brain. The archon, the demented alien mind parasite. And all of a sudden, the virus becomes the bug that's in the brain that becomes the mind virus that takes over the host. And you lose when I was watching the show again, Tony had his head, off to the left side, meaning the left side of his brain was coming out. That's the part for logic and critical thinking. Left side of the brain.
I don't know if that's my end or your end, but you what did you say? It's the part of the brain that fell out, which was the
what was the left side was for logic and critical thinking processing.
Okay, well, which explains why, again, it stops you. That's what stops you from being so emotional and emotionally driven in the political realm, which we find now. It's complete unreasonableness on both sides. It's no longer even what the side represents. It's just that you're on that side and I'm on this side, and we're going to contradict each other. Contradict meaning we're going to use different language against each other. We're literally not talking. People, if you haven't noticed, people aren't talking. You've got the left and the right. They're not communicating at all. They're just contradicting each other, just as they said in that show. Even the news... Excuse me. I just had to expel some bugs there. Even the news, even the news agencies right now, they're pretending to be against each other to foment this completely unreasonable response in people. And for God's sake, Fox News is now calling other news organizations the mainstream, as if it's not mainstream. For God's sake, Disney just bought part of Fox, right? It's freaking ridiculous what's happening right now. It's completely irreasonable, completely illogical, and yet people somehow love it. And in the show, this is another thing that I again, it shows you the backbone of what government does. They create. What I got the quote here. Where's the quote? I gotta find it. Oh shit. Okay. It says, what are we gonna do? It says, quote, build our own grassroots, or we can create one we can create and control. We'll call it the one layers. So this is the Republican Party, and as people come in, they tell people, you want to help the senator, you want to help the country, then build a grassroots movement. Say I don't know, the Tea Party, right? We can build our own grassroots movement, one that we can create and control. That was the quote. And then you see the Democratic Party doing the same thing. Well, we need the opposite of that, and I don't remember what they called it. But then the rest of the show is this constant background of the one-wayers versus the whatever it is. They say they say help America rise again. Is the mock on Trump. Right, so they have basically Trump's campaign in a nutshell mocked on this show, right? So you've got the one-wayers versus the whatever. And that's all they do is fight. From that point on, they contradict each other at every turn. There's no communication whatsoever going on. It's just an illogical, unreasonable, emotionally driven fight between left and right. No different than, say, the Palestinians versus the Jews, or whatever group you want to use and have no reason to fight anymore, right? In these modern, there's absolutely unreasonable for us to be fighting and have wars at this time, and yet look what's happening, right?
And here's why, Clint. I've looked at this so heavily over my entire span of analysis. It's the dialectic. So you and I could right now have an argument. Now, is Peter Pan's tunic forest green or is it Kelly green? And we could go about that for hours until somebody like you had said in the past, Roger Rabbit, that's a cartoon character. Peter Pan doesn't exist. And unless you come to that point, until you say, okay, this is all fiction, and we're wasting our time arguing fiction, what's behind the scenes? This is one of the chapter titles of the interview of the producers and the writers. It was called The Third-Party Politics of Brain Dead. And so what nobody's really looking at is you get caught up in, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, and you look at the fight across the aisle because that's the way it's portrayed in the television series. But what it was, the entire plot below the surface of perception was that it was the politics of the damn bug.
Exactly.
Party.
Because and they did this throughout the show. They kept showing the notion of compromise, right? We're going to they have the shutdown of the government, all because they wanted some $35 million earmark, and the one party said, no, we're not going to give that to you. We're going to close the government, right? So the whole thing was about these backwater deals that they're doing. And then that money goes towards building the bug's infrastructure, right?
That's it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's it.
So I couldn't believe what I was seeing in this show because it's exactly everything. So, and this brings us to what I thought was the most incredible political reveal I've ever heard in television. That I know that 99, and they know that 99.99% of the people are not going to even notice or understand. If they did notice, they wouldn't understand it because they don't know this about the Republican National Party. All right, here's the dialogue. This is the dialogue between the Democratic whip, who's now the minority, and the majority, which is the Republican Party whip, who's the guy that's infected, right? Tony Shalhoub, right? And here is the dialogue. He says, the Democrat Party, da-da-da-da-da. And they switch over to the other guy, and he says, that's Democratic. And then the Republican says, well, not lately. And the Democrat says, oh, great zinger. And he says, thank you, I've got 1 million of them. And he says, why are your Democrat friends being so difficult? You and your socialist friends can da-da-da-da-da, right? So there's this dialogue going on, right? In the meanwhile, someone else is talking, so you have to really concentrate to hear it. But I want to tell you folks what just transpired in this conversation. He said the Democrat Party, and he corrects him and says that's Democratic, and he says, well, not lately, and he says, great zinger. Okay, that's, in other words, he just... So I have a blog, okay? Republican National Party is a member of the International Democrat Union. Right? People don't know this, right? But first of all, the Democratic Party became the Republican Party. When you look up the Republican, so of or pertaining to democratic means of or pertaining to democracy, which is the worst place you can be, or to a political party called Democratic, particularly in the United States. The Democratic Party, which succeeded the Anti-Federalist or Republican Party. Okay? So, in other words, so now you know where the Democratic Party came from. All right? So, wait a minute. What happened to the Republican Party? Here we go to I gotta find these. I gotta find the part here. When you go to the IDU, which is the International International Democrat Union, here's what it says. It says, being committed to advancing the social and political values on which democratic societies are founded, including the basic personal freedoms and human rights, as defined in the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The root of the IDU's political agenda is Fabian socialism, which wants to blur national borders and cultures, eliminate private property and individual liberty in favor of the common good. I'm reading from Gun Owners of America, by the way. The Fabians consider themselves to be a ruling elite that knows better than individuals how to run their lives. Their way is heads, government wins, tails, citizen loses. It is the worst form of tyranny, and this is the root of the IDU, which the Republican Party is a member of internationally, and by association, apparently the Republican Party. This answers a lot of questions about recent Republican policy decisions. Okay? There's a lot of complaints about the GOP chairman not removing the Republican Party from the International Democrat Union because it's all socialism. It's the history section from the IDU.org. It says it's a working association of over 80 conservative, Christian Democrat, and like-minded political parties of the center and center-right. Well, did you know that your party, if it is your party, is joined with 80 other different parties around the world? Formed in 1983, the IDU provides a forum in which parties holding similar beliefs can come together and exchange views on matters of policy and organizational interest so that they can learn from each other, act together, establish contracts and contacts, and speak with one strong voice to promote democracy and center-right politics around the globe. Founding members of the IDU includes Britain's Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, George Bush Sr., Paris Mayor and President of France Jacques Chirac, German Chancellor Helmut Kohl, etc. And then it goes on and it says the International Democrat Union, it consists of member parties of the Asian Pacific Democrat Union, the Caribbean Democrat Union, the Democrat Union of Africa, the European Democrat Union, European People's Party, the Alliance of European Conservatives and Reformists, and the Union of Latin American Parties, which have adhered to the IDU Declaration of Principles. So you got the Republican Party, part of the International Democrat Party, and it adheres to the Declaration of Principles of the IDU. All right, so it goes on and it tells you that it's liberal democracy. It's all about socialism. I mean, I could go on and on and on about this, but it's all these leading countries in the world, and so going back to the show, the Republican does the zinger. He says the Democrat Party. He corrects him. He says, "No, we're not the Democrat. You're the Democrat. That's democratic." And he says, well, not lately, saying basically you're just like us. You're freaking socialists. And so he says, great zinger. See, this no one would catch this. I had to watch it 3 or 4 different times to actually get what they were saying. He's literally saying that the Republican Party, who's a member of the Democrat Union internationally, calls the Democratic Party the Democrat Party, and he has to correct him. The whole point was to call. Are you getting what I'm saying? Basically,
100%.
Yeah, I mean, I was amazed at some of the things they were throwing out there.
Because I had one tiny little insight to that when I was looking into like the Federalist Papers and all that kind of stuff historically, and I don't follow it as deeply as you do. I had seen a mention of Democratic Republicans, and it's like, what? And it was a party, back, what, I don't know what era, 1700s. The Democratic Republicans, and it's like, but the male and the female bug hate each other, and what you're saying, Clint, is that what people fear, they always fear the future. Oh, we're headed towards a one world government. You just said since 1983, the entire structure was in place for a one world government. It's already here. Stop worrying about the future.
Yeah, well, Thomas Jefferson is stated clearly by Joyce Appleby in the Encyclopedia Britannica. He says, note that the political party today, known as the Democratic Party, was initially established as the Republican Party.
There you go.
The Jeffersonian Party members were labeled Democratic by opposition Federalists, an attempt to stigmatize them as purveyors of democracy, or what's called mob rule. By the Jacksonian era, the term the democracy was in use by the party. The name the Democratic Party was eventually settled upon, became the official name in 1844. So, I mean, they're telling you that one used to be the other, and then I don't know how the Republican Party was reestablished, but I mean, the Chicago Democratic Socialists of America are part of this. Right? Employment and Survival in Urban America meeting was sponsored by the UFC DSA Youth Section, Alderman of Chicago's 4th Ward, and Barack Obama, candidate for the 13th Illinois Senate District. Okay? A town meeting by Chicago Democratic Socialists of America, which are actually a member of the International Democrat Party, which the Republican Party is a member of. There is no difference. You see, this is what we're talking about. This is the notion of contradiction, right? Contradiction of terms. Wait a minute, Republican, Democrat, they're the same thing, you dumbass.
They all got bugs in their head. It's the third party, man. So Gore Vidal said it's a one-party system with two right wings. And it's like, nobody can see that. They want to align themselves with the dialectic and go, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, my daddy's bigger than your daddy and can beat him up. It's like, no, it's the same daddy. So, Clint, send me links to the IDU stuff, whether it's your blog or, what you just read, and I'll send that to my list.
Yeah, dude, it's hilarious once you see through it, you can't be fooled by it anymore. And that, I think, is why the bugs attack your logic center. Right?
Oh, so exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. You're fighting over nothingness. You're fighting over a pretend difference, a contradiction. Yeah. It's hilarious. Yeah. And guess what? This has resulted in candidates for any NP party must sign a contract with the NP. So Barack Obama was an honored attendee and speaker for the Socialist Party of Chicago, September 1995, and contracted publicist for the Marxist New Party. And for the New Party, he had to sign a contract with the NP. The contract mandates that they must have a visible and active relationship with the new party. I'm just like, holy shit. Here's our president, but he's a Democrat-ic. Democrat or Democratic. I don't know the difference anymore.
It's socialist.
Yeah.
So this is what Robert King said. Somebody, like an economist or somebody in politics, had presented the argument that an alien invasion would bring people and the economy together.
Yep.
But he said, you know what? And this is why they did this particular TV series. He said that's actually unreal because the way that we see politics work, and that's the way they portrayed it, is the alien invasion would actually tear it apart. And we're going back to the dialectic again. If you and I are arguing what color green Peter Pan's tunic is, we're not going to say that it's a fiction. We're just going to go back and forth on it. If these political factions are, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, are being waged, and nobody's looking at the third party, which is the bug in the head, you're never going to know your enemy. Sun Tzu's second max.
What? Here's the brilliant part. So when I go, if I go and I type in the word for, okay, if I type in the word FOR, like I'm for something.
Okay.
The first definition in Webster's 1828 dictionary is against. Just think about it. If I want a wall to stand, I'm for the wall, and therefore I'm going to put my weight against the wall. That's a bad example, but you understand that to be for something is actually to be, or to lean against it, right? To against, in other words, is not what you think it is. So you consider the two-party system, and we understand that it's two pillars that are constantly supporting each other when one falls. It has to be that way. Otherwise, it would be just tyranny, right? One party, it means just basically a dictator, right? So you have to pretend that it's not a dictatorship of, quote-unquote, the people, e pluribus unum, out of many one, voice, right? So you have this system. So truly, you said that you say that an alien, or they said that an alien invasion would actually bring the people together. Well, I submit to you that by tearing us apart, it does bring us together.
My head hurts. Okay, right. Explain that. For those of us who need Excedrin. What?
You're focused on the two-party system. What you're not focused on is that those two parties are part of the same system. So you're for the system no matter what. Even though you're against the party that's in charge, you're still for the system because you're for a party that would run against it. So you're being tricked no matter what. No matter what you do, you're participating or respecting the system itself. Fuck the parties. Who cares about the parties? The parties don't matter. So the alien invasion that's going on in our heads, you could call it metaphoric or you could call it what we're talking about. Either way, as long as you're participating in the system, as long as you're voting, which is just nothing more than a public poll, it doesn't mean anything. Your vote doesn't count, you fools. The Electoral College, the elect the elect, not us. Public vote doesn't count, right? So you're literally, by being for or against the other party, you're for government. You're showing respect. I mean, it's just, that's the brilliant part. So tearing us apart, making us constantly want one party or the other, which consists of cousins, right? And it's just cousins. You understand? It's just cousins.
It's mental judo. Yep. They threw the people.
Yeah. So
weight. They use the weight of the people against themselves.
Two distinctly related branches of the family from Oyster Bay on Long Island and Hyde Park in Dutchess County, upstate New York, achieved national political prominence with the elections of Republican presidents Theodore Roosevelt, 1901 to 1909, and his fifth cousin, Democrat Franklin Delano Roosevelt, 1933 to 1945, whose wife, First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, was Theodore's niece. That's right in Wikipedia. Okay, so you had the Republican, Theodore Roosevelt, his fifth cousin, Democrat Franklin Delano Roosevelt, same family, and his wife was First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, Theodore's niece. So Franklin married the daughter of the Republican and became the Democratic president. That is the true story right there of everything that happens in politics. But if you present it as two different sides, No, yeah, well, you sure we're cousins, but hey, no, this is your landlords. This is like the meeting of landlords, right? The meeting of those who are in control of everything, who want to tax and extort from you in any means possible, and they all get together and they create these laws and they pretend to be against each other, but they all have the same end goal, which is your extortion. There doesn't matter if there's a disagreement. The disagreement is petty because ultimately, by supporting your party candidate, you're supporting the very thing that extorts from you.
Because it's one. E pluribus unum. The one wayers.
One
it's
family.
It's always one. And what is a hive? A hive is a unit. There are such things called solitary wasps, and they won't sting you unless they are in mortal danger. They always try to go away because they're solitary. If they, attack a threat and they get disabled or killed, then it's over for them. They don't have a hive that will then come out and defend it. So there are solitary wasps, and that's pretty much what we are. You know, if we're to characterize Pat and Clint and, Melissa members, we're solitary wasps. But the hive is the thing that has us all going, because that thing, it only serves itself. There are no individuals. There's only the one, and the hive will defend itself to the death.
Well, it seems to be on the offense at this point.
Okay. Well, and see, yeah, I used the wrong word in the height of passion. And the other thing that I wanted to bring out, Clint, is a really subtle, idea, subplot theme, is that if you are incompatible with the bugs, your head exploded.
Oh, exploding head syndrome. How could we forget exploding head syndrome?
It's my favorite part.
It's an integral part. I loved it when they were debating. So you had the newscaster, you had and three different debates, right? And like you see on the regular news, they're all talking at once. The one guy who's infected, eventually he can't control his emotions. He gets overheated and his head explodes. Right on the film. But what I found more interesting is that the scientist whose head exploded, and he said, "They're in my head," right? When they flashed onto the scene, they were giving him oxygen. We've talked about how they're just, our oxygen levels on this earth are going down slowly but surely. Right? So I noticed that. And then the other thing I noticed is that the other guy's head that exploded, because he had bugs in them, was going through a CAT scan. So what have we talked about, right? When it comes to prions, for instance, how do they activate prions or misfolded prions? They put infected prions into healthy prions, and then they bombard it with ultrasound frequency. So whatever was in the CAT scan was a frequency that the bugs didn't like. It caused the bugs to go crazy, and the head explodes. How many times have we talked about frequency? Rife came up with all the frequencies that would kill certain pathogens, right? Kill certain viruses and bugs. A certain frequency is a deadly to the bugs, and while it wouldn't affect us at all. We have a health frequency, and we have frequencies that we don't like as humans. Well, so does every bug, as Royal Rife found out. So they're showing us again. Do you remember the question I posed in my blog was, how do we come up with the test? How do we test? How do we know? What's the thing test, right? How in the movie The Thing, which was another John Carpenter movie, they collected everybody's blood and they attacked the blood with a hot wire. And if you were infected, if you were the thing, right, the clone, basically the evil clone, it would protect itself. It would react, right, and morph into whatever it was to try to protect itself. It couldn't help it, because that's the nature of the parasite, nature of the enemy, right? So what's our thing test was our thing, and it sounds to me like they're telling us it's frequency right there, because this is all about communication. all about cell communication. It's all about the parasite causing miscommunication. Well, what disrupts communication? That's our test, man. How do we develop a test? And they did this in the show. Okay, so he converted his recorder or cell phone or whatever it was to extend a frequency. And when he pointed that frequency directly at one of the people who were infected by the bugs, they put their hand up arbitrarily, no reason why. Right? They acted strangely because he was disrupting the communication between the queen or whatever frequency and the bugs themselves. And suddenly the body, the temple that was the body of the bugs temple was out of control. That seems to be our test, Patrick. I mean, we take this shit seriously. We're not kidding. Anything we say today is as funny as it is. We're not kidding, man. This is serious shit. We're talking about an entire population of people who are possibly infected by parasites, causing us to do stupid things, causing us to act against our own interest. Again, the CDC tells us, right? You can't deny that. So there's, I've seen articles about parasites that make you stupid. I've seen articles that'll turn off, parasites that'll turn off certain concepts, certain rationalities, certain parts of the brain. They talk about vaccines doing the same thing. So we're talking about something very, very real presented in this brilliant freaking show called Brain Dead.
So what they said is, and this was predictive for their interview. They said, well, we hope it goes for more than one season because we planned for a 4-year run. So it would start in Washington. The second season, and that's the way they ended it, so that it would transition, that the senator and that other aide would end up on Wall Street. That was the second target because one bug did survive. And then the third, and they were going to use the same characters, to keep continuity. The third target was Silicon Valley. And see, I can't, analyze everything that these people say and have brilliant insight when they say it, but I did write down because I thought it was significant. They said, and we had to target Silicon Valley because they're destroying that valley with their gentrification. I don't even know what that means, but if Robert King said it, then he was sending a message.
It's like when a poor neighborhood or a cultural neighborhood, all of a sudden you'd see a Starbucks, or you'd see something that doesn't belong there, an art studio, and it's basically what they did in New York. New York, between the time I lived in New York and I was right under 14th Street, the time I went and visited again, basically the Long Island Artistic District, basically it basically moved into New York. The 14th Street became like a walking mall, like an open air mall all of a sudden. Just everything was gentrified is basically what that means.
Okay, so again, Washington, Wall Street, Silicon Valley, and he said, and then the last one would have been Hollywood. And I'm going, yeah, that makes sense. And Robert King said, because that's the core of the insanity.
It's true. I would say that happened long ago. I would say it was infected. I would say it was infected by Jews a long time ago. Forever Jews.
We're all going all the way back to insanity. What is it? It's a problem with the brain, the mind virus, the complete loss of sense and physical architecture of the brain. Clint, they had to show bugs. They had to show ants because in an artistic presentation, you have to make it accessible to people. Now, you and I could probably go to electron microscope and show viruses, well, those don't exist. There's your dialectic there. Viruses don't exist. We could show bacteria. We could show any number of parasites, including the single-celled parasite of toxoplasmosis, that makes cats think that, that make mice think that cat urine smells sexy. Okay? These are all physical things. We could go into the lab and demonstrate with physical evidence that these things exist and they do create these changes. And what I don't want anybody to come out of this particular exchange between you and me or watching the show is that the show was some kind of like fictional account. It was fictionalized to bring across the literal biological reality of a mass infection of what we call human beings.
I think it's no different than a lot of these shock jocks who show 90% truth, but then that 10% lie, 10% of the lies cover up the truth, and it is the truth, right? I mean, it's the same model except kind of backwards. But they're instead of trying to say, "Hey, it's true," they're trying to say, "Hey, it's not true," but we're going to make a funny show about it, right?
Right, right. And they're trying to explain, what was going on goofy in 2016 by, making fun of it. It's just a satire.
There's also, and I found this probably the most frightening scene, which was shocking to me, not just because of the scene itself, but because of the implications, was when they sent the FBI guy, or I think that's what he was, to the friend's house who she knew was infected because she had actually switched from being Democrat to Republican or whatever. So they wanted to take her in, and they were going to force her to go in under new laws to require her to be tested for this parasite, which shows up in a CAT scan, but unfortunately explodes your head. And so she said, "Fine, I'll go with you. Let me get my cell phone and my purse." And she heads immediately out to the balcony and jumps off the third floor, smashing her head into the cement. Obviously trying to say that she, the bugs drove her to do it. Right? The bugs.
Yeah.
Right, to protect the queen, to protect the hive, so that we couldn't find out that she was infected with these bugs. And that was, the ramifications of that are very scary, because that is what's, that you could say that's what's driving soldiers to kill. You could say that's what's driving, anything, any aberrant behavior could be caused by that type of response. Protect the hive, right? Protect the hive.
So if you will, let me take you all the way back to your opening comments. And I wanted to get this out because I want to do a double quote of the protocols, since you're bringing this, the sacrificial thing up. So the first comment was that the Shaloub character was a complete derelict drunk to start the show. He got infected by the bug, and all of a sudden he's like putting all of his booze bottles in the garbage can. And see, I have an associative mind, and the first thing I thought of was Protocol 1, number 22. It says, "Behold the alcoholic animals, bemused with drink, the right to an immoderate use of which comes along with freedom. It is not for us and ours to walk that road." And it's like, oh my God, what really is being said here? Because these are the elders. Everybody says, oh, the Jews run the world, and it's a secret cabal, and so this is straight from the Protocols of Zion. And if the elders of Zion say that they and their people will not partake in alcohol, then is alcohol a weapon? And should the goyim, whoever that might be, because, I don't identify with those labels and those words, should anybody else be subjected to it? And right there, it was freaky for me.
Oh, well,
Clint,
Patrick.
to watch him put the alcohol in the garbage can.
Yeah, Patrick, I've got a book you should read. It's called Forever Juice. Forever Juice. Forever Juice. Forever Juice. Forever Juice. Yes.
Oh my God, that is so funny.
What I also found funny is when they basically showed how they converted a Democrat over to the Republican side and took the majority. And here's what he said. He said Republican and Democrat, it's a brand.
Yeah.
You know, you eat Cheerios this morning and wheat checks tomorrow. It's just a brand. And he's so true. So freaking true. That's again amazing truth being put in a comedic, a mockumentary, basically is what we could call this.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. And so here's the point of the sacrifice, and this is why the woman took like a head dive off of her balcony to protect the hive. This is Protocol 2, Line 5. In the hands of the state today, there is a great force that creates the movement of thought in the people, and that is the press. The part played by the press is to keep pointing our requirements, supposed to be indispensable, to give voice to the complaints of the people, to express and to create discontent. It is in the press that the triumph of freedom of speech finds its incarnation. But the Goyim states have not known how to make use of this force, and it has fallen into our hands. Through the press, we have gained the power to influence while remaining ourselves in the shade. And that's what I'm saying. If you argue a dialectic, you're not looking for that third party. Thanks to the press, we have got the gold in our hands, notwithstanding that we have had to gather it out of the ocean of blood and tears. But it has paid us, though we have sacrificed many of our people. Each victim on our side is worth in the sight of God 1,000 goyim. And that told me right then, see, you had said a long time ago that there was a rabbi that was mocking the Gentile, the Goy, by saying, yeah, we taught you games and rules, and we don't follow them. And
basically that our entire culture has developed into that we learn our entire social stratus, our morals and values from sport. We hunt for sport. We do things, and so competition basically and then a big part of that is that we forget about it. We go through this whole $1 billion thing. We watch the game, we play the Super Bowl, and then it's forgotten. It's like it never happened after it's over. It was nothing. It basically was a show. It doesn't exist as anything tangible, and yet we base our whole society and our whole morals and values, our ethics, especially the ethics, on the sport. And when you look at sport, the definition of sport, it's actually a really bad thing.
And I can't remember the source of this, but somebody in like the social engineering department had said that if you can get a body of people to do one thing at one time, so that, that's the invention of holidays. It's the invention of the Super Bowl. Everybody's either watching or attending the game. Everybody's buying concessions at the stand. Everybody's cheering. Everybody's doing something together. Then the next thing that you want them to do will be an easy task because they've already been conditioned to work as a unit. And this is the scary part about Protocol 2.5 is because then I realized the ruthlessness of the elders. They were basically saying, yeah, we're going to throw Granny under the bus if it serves our ends. They don't even care about the sacrifice of their own people. They care about the end goal.
Yeah. I feel that we need to give an honorary mention here.
Okay.
To the Cochleomya hominivorax. A Cochleomya Hominivores is commonly called the New World screwworm fly. Or just screwworm for short. And this was what the people, the scientists they were trying to get, some notion of what is this thing. And the screwworm was the closest thing they could think of. So they used the term screwworm. So, it's like a screwworm. It's not a screwworm, obviously, because it's a little ant-looking thing, but it's like a screwworm. So the Cochleomya hominivores, or the New World screwworm fly, or screwworm for short, is a species of parasitic fly that is well known for the way which its larvae, i.e. maggots, eat the living tissue of warm-blooded animals. It is present in the New World tropics. There are 5 species of this, but only one species of screwworm fly in the genus. There's also a single one-world species in a different genus. Infestation of a live vertebrate animal by a maggot is technically called myiasis. I don't know how to say that. While the maggots of many fly species eat dead flesh and may occasionally infest an old and putrid wound, screwworm maggots are unusual because they attack healthy tissue. Screwworms are a reportable species to the state veterinarian in the United States if discovered on livestock. It says the screwworm females lay 250 to 500 eggs in the exposed flesh of warm-blooded animals, including humans, such as in wounds and the navels of newborn animals. The larvae hatch and burrow into the surrounding tissue as they feed. Let's see. It goes deeper into the flesh, which is the source of the insect's name. The maggots are capable of causing severe tissue damage and even death to the host. About 3 to 7 days after hatching, the larvae fall to the ground to pupate. The pupae reach the adult stage, etc., etc., etc. The United States has officially eradicated the screwworm in 1982 using the sterile insect technique. However, in 2016... an outbreak occurred. 2016. In 2016, an outbreak occurred in Monroe County, Florida. The screwworm was eradicated in Guatemala and Belize in 1994, El Salvador in 1985, etc. And they're still going on to eradicate it in Mexico, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, and Jamaica, with financial assistance from the United States Department of Agriculture. So there you go. That's what they were comparing it to in the show.
Damn spooky.
Yeah. So honorable mention to Cochleomya hominivores.
Another thing that I wanted to highlight, because I wrote a book called Eve's Ill, where I basically make the... let's just call it a legal argument, and it's part of the maxims of law that the only way to get out of something is to go reverse of the way you got in. So if you enter a marriage, that's a marriage between you and the state, and the only way to get out of it is to, dissolve that between you and the state. And so, the legends of the world always blame women for all of the ills and evils of the world, and so that's why I called it Eve's Ill. That's the name of the book. And so to say whether or not we're going to blame all human females throughout all time is not the topic here. The topic is that I view men as castrated beings that have been either bred out or lost their warrior spirit. And therefore, my conclusion in the book was, if there was going to be any change, then it would have to be through the agency of women. Women, whether or not these legends were true and they're the authors of all evil, we came into the world through women. Unless you're Arnold Schwarzenegger and you're, doing a movie about birth and a baby, that's where we came from. Women raise children, so they have the unique and ultimate control to raise all children with, should I say it, morals, ethics, uprightness. And I know, like, in many cultures, that's it's like thwarted by the male section.
One of the funny things that the senator said, the Republican senator said, is, he's taking pictures with a little kid, and he's, it's so true. And this is what's so funny, because it is so true with these psychopaths, right? He's like, I don't like, nobody likes children. It was hilarious. I don't remember what he said exactly, but he's like, nobody loves I hate children. Nobody loves children. And it was so apropos to, that senatorial lifestyle.
He was just using it. It was a photo op to achieve his ends and means. Now, if the world is going to change, my premise is that it's going to have to be a woman or women to do it. The basic warrior queen. And when I looked at the structure of Brain Dead, and I listened to the Robert King interview, he said that they basically set up the Democratic senator as the hero. And I thought, no, that's not true in any sense of the word, because if you watch the female lead character throughout the entire opening of this series, she was the change. She had to make her brother do the right thing. It was always the female. And what was the driving force of the opposition? It was the queen bug. Well, so it was female against female. And I'm thinking, man, like I said, there is only one movie, there is only one story, and I'm sticking to it. If this world we live in is going to change, it's going to have to come through women.
I'll agree with that with a caveat here, and that is that women have to realize that. I mean, I'm sorry. This is not feminist. It's not sexist. It's not it's nothing. It's nothing but the truth, and that is that men must. Men are naturally, the masculine is always going to be more powerful than the feminine. That's not going to change. All right. And so the I'm sorry, but that's just the way it's always been. It's the way it's always going to be. That is not a bad thing. It's not anything. It's neutral. It's just the way nature works. It's the way a lion pride works. It's the way everything works. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's okay. I'm not for it or against it. It's just nature. And what the woman has to realize, if she's going to change, she's going to have to support the man, teach the man, love the man, masculate the man.
Write it down.
Let the man be the man, but you have to give the man that feminine support, because without the men work on logic. Men are reasonable, and if they have bad grammar, then they're going to be completely logical about bad grammar, which means everything's going to get all fucked up like it is today. The woman, if she wants to have power, must do it through communion with the man, not some feminist movement to make women in a power position, because that defeats the entirety of the natural order. And I don't say that again as anything but the truth. It's the self-evident truth. So if women are going to change, they have to respect this, and they have to show the man the right way. They have to use their
influence.
Influence, yeah, but like I said, this demasculation thing that's happening with men is starting to really, really show. I mean, men are running away from marriage at an all-time high. No one wants to get married anymore to these because women are emotionally driven. This is the truth, okay? Again, it has nothing to do with anything but how things work. The emotionally driven woman grounds the logic-based man. into this perfection of being behind every good man is a good woman, right? That makes perfect sense. There's nothing wrong with that. It's when women try to compete and be men or be like men. You're not a man, you're a woman. Embrace it, love it, be what you're supposed to be, and then men, maybe they can actually start acting like men again. But until you stop emasculating and just allowing this shit to happen to where I mean, what was funny to me was the sex scene that happened in there where she was repulsed. She tried to act, she was still herself. She still wanted to have sex with this guy, but the bug made her repulsed to his kiss. And all she could say, because she'd lost her femininity, she was like repulsed by everything sexual, but she's like, no, please, I want to pleasure you. And the guy looks at her like, what the fuck are you talking about? What, you want to pleasure me? Right? That's the word of the bug. Because she doesn't know how to act like a woman anymore. Likewise, the men don't know how to be men because women aren't acting like women. And that's, I think, what you're saying.
In a roundabout way that brought the series back into play, well, yeah, and it's cooperative, and I hope there's no negative connotations to that word. Let's say complementary, like complementary colors in an artwork. That's the relationship that needs to be done. And see, what I saw so much in healthcare over 11 years was the nurses and the technicians in a dialysis unit literally hated their family. It didn't matter if it was their husbands, their kids, anybody. They hated their family. And I thought to myself, after a lot of introspection, it's like, well, wait a minute. If they hate their own family, there's no way that they could have compassion for the patients under their care. And that's why these patients were falling like flies, because the nurses and techs just didn't give a shit. And the other thing that I saw within that format was single mothers. And so these single mothers, for whatever reason, and I'm not assigning blame, they did not get along with the fathers of their children. And a lot of them, I'm going to make a categorical statement, hated men. So what happens in that kind of relationship? You don't have a nuclear family. There's no male presence. And you're being raised by a mother that hates men. How is that kid going to turn out? So, Clint, that's why I said, I looked at the female as the central figure in defeating the bug. My book, Ease Ill, says women are going to be the central figure in what? Defeating the bug? Because, by that time I had already arrived at a viral explanation for the essence of evil. And so we're looking at not a man as the savior of the world. A female entity, a presence, is going to be what turns this entire universe around. And if they can get that in their head and we can work together, it might work.
You're so pussified.
Hey, I said this on air before.
I bet you want Hillary Clinton for president.
Yeah, with a stained pantsuit. So, here's the thing, Clint. I've said this before on air, so it's nothing new. I would go out there and I would get the job done, except for this thing, that the hive is more powerful than anything else in the universe, and it would probably be a well-meaning person, probably even a Christian, that would turn me in for doing the right thing. And it's like, no, ain't going to save the world. I ain't going to do it. But there's a principle at work here, and it's within the writings of Sun Tzu, to win without fighting, which is completely, totally possible. And how would you do that? Well, the 100th monkey, the solidarity thing, well, yeah, maybe. But it may be just something like inventive, creative. And what is that? That's the right side of the brain. That's the thing that the women are best for. They might find a creative solution to defeat the enemy without hand-to-hand combat in the streets.
And I don't want to be misunderstood either. I mean, the ultimate power is what the woman, the female, has, because when you control the masculine by extending the feminine and making the masculine come down to meet in that middle ground, some would say yin yang, etc. That is the ultimate power. The women sit back and say, "Yeah, I did that," but it's the pride, it's the need that we've been tricked into for taking credit for things. I'm a CEO. When in fact the real power, as you know and I know, is always in the background. The real power structure, the real elite, the real elect. They're sitting in the background watching all of these puppets, all these politicians, all these decision makers do their bidding, right? So I say to the female listening today, the ultimate way to fix things is to figure out the right way to deal with male figures, so that you are correcting their fallacies, their logical fallacies, because we're a logic-based, right, mostly. If you can just do that, if you just go back to being feminine, to not trying to compete, remember, equality is not in the Bible. Equality is a concept that was created by the Freemasons. All right, equality, liberty, all this shit that they talk about. That's going to be That's going to be my next show, by the way, is that on Freemasonry, the city of Philadelphia, what its background is. That'll be next week. It'll be a pre-recorded show. It turned out pretty good. But all you got to do is figure out how to manipulate, if you will, in a good way, in a positive way, men. And as you say, Patrick, things will go back to a yin-yang situation where things are mutually beneficial for all, and people aren't trying to get one up or compete or be equal.
Right.
They're not equal. There is no such thing as equality except in fiction.
So I got a short-term memory. That's why I don't have a short-term memory. That's why I have to write everything down. Did you actually say pussy whipped earlier on? When I was giving my female speech, and you go, "Oh yeah, you're pussy whipped. You want Hillary in?"
Pussified.
Did you say that? I'm fact checking. That's all.
I said pussified. Yes.
Okay. So let's just go with my version of it. That women can exert power, but power can either be cooperative or antagonistic. Yeah. So if women actually do come into a realization of how much power and influence they have over men, they don't have to be antagonistic about it. They can just realize that the power is there, and see that it's a core principle taught in martial arts. You have the ability to kill somebody. So are you just going to put the machine gun on full auto and spray everybody with your newfound skills, or are you going to adopt humbleness? Because you're really top level martial artists are humble people. They're monks, and they're growing tofu in their garden, and they don't go out and kick ass, but they have the ability to destroy anybody with a touch.
Oh, Patrick, I could see it now. You just ruined our whole show.
Oh no, how? What?
You said that people grow tofu.
Oh yeah, Jews.
How can anybody take us seriously?
Juicing.
You seriously? Are there Monsanto fields of tofu now? So I'll put a final coin. I'll put a final touch on this particular subject.
Oh
all right?
No! Oh
Here
no!
It is.
We're going so well.
Here it is.
Yeah.
Who did all those bugs work for? They were all male. Who is it that they were protecting? Who is it that they were doing all the work for?
The queen.
The queen. Who's the queen? The female. Okay? That's how much power the woman can have if she recognizes the male dominant figure and controls it in a way that she's supposed to. That is the power of the female. And it's more powerful than the male. The male is just physically stronger, and it's always going to be that way. I'm sorry. And if it's not, then you're not in nature anymore. You've been transhumanized or whatever. So again, think of that model. Think of the very model of this thing we're talking about, the power of the queen. It's always the queen. It's always the hive. Think of the bees. The bees, they're all male. What do they work for? What do they strive? Who do they protect, and who do they love, and who do they do all their work for? They do it for the queen. And think of the typical male out there. He goes to work 8, 10, 12 hours a day. Why does he do that? To support his queen. And yet the queen is treating him like shit now. The queen is litigious. The queens that are our wives, they're no longer part of the husbandry model. They're now antagonistics. They're the antagonist. They have no empathy, no understanding that the man is specifically designed in nature to take care of and support and prop up the female. But if the female just acts like a freaking asshole, then none of it's going to work. So you're right, man. The female has all the power. It is up to the female of the species to correct the male. And
okay, what's your quote? What's that quote where we don't even talk anymore, we just argue?
Oh, we don't really talk, do we? We just contradict each other.
Contradict, and see that theme. It doesn't matter politics or gender relations, man. That
right
theme
is male. There. Right is male, left is female. Left is male, right is female. Doesn't matter which side you assign it to. It's the fact that they've put us against each other. We're supposed to be together. They call the male plug and a female plug. For God's sake, we're supposed to be together. And the fact that they've driven us apart, and as you said, that destroys the family unit. It's so obvious, and yet I'm going to be called sexist. Oh, he's a male chauvinist. Oh, no, you're just contradicting me. You're not listening to what I'm saying. I'm saying you have all the power. You have all the power over me. But you're not using it. You're directed to sue me instead and take all my I have a friend who's a doctor. His wife, because of the attorney, spent $2.5 million making him so freaking miserable to get $5 million as a settlement. So she lost $2.5 million of her $5 million settlement went to the attorneys. Okay, that's how unreasonable we've become. That is not how this is supposed to happen.
And it is because there is the third party at work setting people at odds with each other. If people just realize that third party is the target, is the enemy, then they'll stop fighting amongst themselves. There won't be divide of left, right, male, female, Democrat, Republican. It'll be the damn bugs.
I know, and it's so funny because once you realize it's the bug. What do the protocols say? It's only 1 in a million that'll figure this out.
Oh, yeah. They fear the genius, yeah.
Forever Jews, forever Jews, forever Jews, forever Jews.
I'm not worthy. I never caught that, man.
Oh, there's one other quote that I was blown away by because I say it myself on a constant basis. I keep trying to tell people this, and I was really surprised to hear this. It was the senator, and he was trying to explain the fact that while he had a wife, that he was sleeping with his assistant, the bug lady, right? And here's what he's trying to explain it, to his sister. His sister slapped him because he's cheating on his wife, right? Yeah. And he's trying to explain it. Here's what he says. He says, "How do you explain in prose something that's poetry?" He's talking about the fact that he sees this beautiful woman and wants to, because that's his nature and it's natural, and yet he has this wife, he has this commitment, this contract, etc., etc., and he's trying to explain his adultery, and he says, how do you explain in prose something that's poetry? Remember what I've been saying. The Goyim speak in prose, literalism, and the gods speak in poetry. They speak in poetry. So the fact that he said that and used the word prose, and it said poetry instead of verse, but that's a Manly P. Hall quote. The gods speak in verse and we speak in prose. I was blown away when I heard that, because again, I'm not supporting the fact that he was cheating on his wife. I'm just saying that instead of recognizing the way things are and that it did happen, all you're doing is saying, it shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have happened. No, it shouldn't have happened. You cheated on your wife, but it did happen, and it's something that we need to be able to talk about, right? But you can't talk about it because how do you explain lust? How do you explain love? How do you explain attraction? You can't unless you're poetic, right? Metaphoric. You can't put a literalist or prose type of thing on it. So anyway, I was very amazed that particular line was used. And
you said that was attributed to Manly P. Hall, the Freemason?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I noticed. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
What I noticed studying martial arts is the deepest secrets were always put in poetry, because the basic left side of the brain can't figure it out. It's like, I don't understand these stupid words. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. I don't get it. And it was designed on purpose, because if you're going to codify your deepest secrets, you're not going to want the general populace to be able to figure it out.
Sure, that is the nature of the mystery. You create your own mystery, right? If you can't understand the metaphor unless you know the literal, and you can't know the literal unless you understand the metaphor. So, what's amazing to me, and this is my conclusion after all the years of research I've done, and I'm a very source-based researcher, right? I go to the source. I go to the patent. I spend hours reading things that no one else would. But I've come to the realization that the only true knowledge is always going to be allegory, metaphor, right? The moral story, the law, right? These things are they're never written, right? When I write a law, it says I will pay this tax for this percentage of tax for this many gallons of gasoline. That's a fact, right? There's nothing to learn in history that is fact based. And that's a really strange concept, but I've come to the conclusion that the only thing that is worth learning is going to be written in poetry. Because why? Because that's the language of the gods. That's the language of enlightened men who you would call divine, which only means that they've been learned or regenerate in the ancient languages and the ancient knowledge, right? So I've really changed my whole outlook on everything at this point, because I now do understand that the only true knowledge are in these old poetic epics, like you said, Gilgamesh. That's where the knowledge lies. You try to read history as a fact, you're not going to get anything out of it. There's no spiritual connection to it whatsoever. I'm going to do this because someone in history did that? Really? Or am I going to do it because there's a moral compass that I should be following, and that's just the example in metaphoric terms why I should do it? Just because a fact happened in history, whether it actually did happen or not, right? I'm amazed, really, that my consciousness has been altered to this point where I find that the only true knowledge is is parable. It's this is the right path and this is the wrong path. You must choose.
So in my 20s, I read the entire Divine Comedy by Dante.
Yeah.
And it actually shaped, the course of my life. And now when you're speaking, Clint, I'm thinking, you know what? Poetry is that transition past pictograms. Because like hieroglyphics, pictograms, and they had like multiple levels of meaning, but they were pictures. So we've gone from like the abstract thoughts in our heads, which are not vocalized, not written down, to pictures, to poetry as a way of communicating. And I get that continuum now. I never saw it before.
Yeah. It's really, you think about every ancient culture, they always tell their stories in ridiculousness. And I took a memory course once, and the way that you can remember a list of 100 or 1,000 things is to associate each word in a ridiculous way. So if the first word was shoe and the next word was elephant, you think in your mind, okay, here's a big pink shoe with purple polka dots being worn by an elephant. Right? You associate the ridiculousness. Oh, here, let's take Jonah and have him be swallowed by a sea monster. Well, they translated it to whale, but it was originally a sea monster. How ridiculous is that? He's sitting in a sea monster, having conversation, right? So you have all these ridiculous things in all these sacred texts because that's how you remember things, right? So I could tell you give me a list, I can associate all those words, and I can give you that list. If you have enough time to associate all the words, I can repeat that list verbatim in its exact order. I can do that with numbers. I can do that with anything, as long as I'm able to associate them with something ridiculous. It has to be something ridiculous. It has to be something unnatural, unreal. That's why the metaphor is so important. That's why the parable is so important, because that is what you remember. And I was really amazed at what I could do with this memory course, although I didn't find it to be very useful at the time, so I didn't really pursue it. But I memorized a list of 100 words. I was like, holy shit, this works, right? And that is a sort of a secret thing that this guy was revealing. But a couple more quotes, just that I wrote down, just because I thought they were incredible. He says the NSA. So one of my favorite characters was Gustav.
Oh, yeah.
Especially the second time around, because he turned out to be a big high-up agent. But the NSA can turn your phone on and broadcast up to 50 feet. As one of the things. That's one of the things he said. So there's a good reveal. And then the senator, the brother, the good guy, if you will, he said he's again. Most people wouldn't catch this, but I think my audience will. He says, I was just thinking, I was just wondering what concurrent resolution 45B has to do with a real person. Now, most people that would pass by most people, but my audience, I hope by now, would be like, holy crap, did he just say that? Did he say a real person? Oh my God. So there's just so many little tidbits and little things that I was just, I was just amazed, really. The other thing was straight out of Body Snatchers, right? The woman comes in and she says, "My husband's just not my husband anymore."
Right.
So
it was very impressive, the quality by which they rendered this version of a 5,000-year-old story.
Yeah. Well, so that brings us to the end, man. We got a couple minutes here. I mean, we're kind of like, what? Like I said, we need some way to tell who's infected and who's not, and I firmly believe this. Obviously the CDC and National Geographic and very many other sources, Ridley Scott and whoever these people, obviously people believe this, and there's plenty of evidence that shows it's a real thing. So how deep this goes, I don't know, but there's got to be a way to test. And that was part of the show too, of course, because they would bring up old love, anything pleasurable, and it would hurt the bug, right?
Right.
There's got to be something that we can test people with that's not going to hurt them, but it's not make their head explode. But, there's got to be something. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. You and I have been talking about the thing test for quite some time.
Well, this is UCY.TV. Red Pill Sunday School, you've been in and Patrick Jordan was my guest today. Vaccinefraud.com. Music will come in anytime, and just utterly just cut in. But I don't know what the test is, but I'm starting to look around and
Is there a point to all this? Let's find a point.
As it said, in the year 2015, it was a growing trend. People were losing their minds. Well, it's 2018 now, and it was like,
we can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. The world is like a ride. You think it's real, just a ride. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. Life goes up and down, round and round. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored.